All right.
Oh, hello. Today I have with me Funsho, and he's a senior software engineer in London. Well, um, yeah, I'll let him introduce himself because he's not quite he's a unique character, He's not a traditional what you might think of as a traditional software engineer. So yeah, please introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Funsho Yenuga. I'm a software engineer. I build for Android at Yelp. And yeah, I'm Nigerian. I live in London. What else do you want to know?
Right. So you made a mention of a lot of things there. Number one is you're an Android engineer. You work in Yelp in London, and you're Nigerian. So I'll go through everything one after
Correct.
the other. But let's talk about how did you get into Android development?
Okay, my journey into Android development started way back in university. And the funny thing is, I never wanted to end up as an Android engineer. So back when I was in uni, I learned a couple of programming languages and then I learned Java.
And by
And
the way,
the
for people who
expect
don't know, you studied computer science, right?
Oh, yes, I
Bachelor's.
did. Yeah. And back then, the path for those that know Java is for you to go into Android development or you build for desktop. But back then, the idea of building for Android never really fascinated me. So then I learned Java up to a point. I was building desktop apps. And then I got bored with desktop apps. So I started to learn Android. And Google has a very, very nice community for Android engineers. So it was very, very easy for me to get into. And I really enjoyed it. And yeah, that's how I'm an Android engineer today.
Well, right. So let's talk about the developer community because Google has a lot of extensive network, and I can testify that it's a really good community. But is it is it fair to say you like to build?
Yes, definitely.
Okay. And what made you got bored with developing for desktop? Is it that people couldn't
So
use
I got
it?
to,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so I was really looking into like the future of building for desktop. At the time, I really didn't see much opportunities out there. I was also looking at like job postings. I didn't really see anyone that was looking for someone to build desktop applications. I mean, it's the modern world. Why would you want to build in desktop apps? Especially in Nigeria, the opportunities were not there. But for Android, Android is an operating system that is very, very popular, especially in Nigeria. So you see job postings for Android engineers everywhere. And I'm like, okay, I think if I go into Android, I might have a career path in this. And also for the desktop part as well, I feel like I got to a point where I felt like I know everything I need to know to build a desktop app. So I was very comfortable building it. So I was looking for like the next challenge to get myself into.
And what year, because for people who don't know, studying in Nigeria university, if you're studying something science, is typically 5 years, right? So, and what year were you doing is this desktop thing? And before you got
I
bored,
think,
actually.
yeah, I think it was back in 2015 or 2014, somewhere around that
So, something
time.
like year two.
Yes, yes.
Well, so you were pretty early in the game because, you know,
Yeah, I started programming in my first year in university. One fun story about me is I got admission to study agric. I was actually studying agric, and then after the exams in 100 level, I'm kind of like a nerd. I had no social life back then, so I was bored because we were done with exams. I was done reading books. There was nothing else for me to explore. So I went into one of my hostel mate's room and I saw this book, Programming in Pascal. So I'm like, hey, what's this book about? I was in his house. I was just going through like the first chapters and they were doing this introduction to computers, talking about
right.
interesting stuff. I'm like, okay, this is interesting. So I asked him if I could borrow the book and I was like, oh, this useless course. We are done with it. You can take the book if you want. So I took the book back to my room. I was just reading the introductory part and then we got to the programming part where you have to print Hello World. I checked on Play Store, and because back then I had no laptop, I checked on Play Store. There was a compiler online for Pascal. I downloaded the compiler. I ran the Hello World program and it worked. And I'm like, oh, it's this easy. Oh, then that means I could become like a programmer. So when we're going home for the holiday, I took the book with me. Whenever I was bored at home, I just used to open it, go through the books, and from there I got introduced to like the conditionals, if else statements, and all of that. And then I played a prank on my friends, using just a bunch of print line statements in Pascal. Then I simulated what our results used to look like. So just basic stuff, print line, function, or print line, GNS 101, and then put the results. So
Yeah.
I tried to use Pascal to create a table that looked like our results.
Yeah.
And then I took a screenshot and sent it to someone to say, hey, I've seen my result. And they were like, oh my God, when did you see it? I'm like, okay, don't worry. I'll check it for you. Just send me a matric number and your name. So that was really fun for me. Like, so this whole thing started out like me just catching cruise, just having fun with it.
Yeah.
But when I was done with my holiday then, I finished the Pascal book. So I'm like, okay, what next? I went online to look for like advanced Pascal book, like how to build GUIs using Pascal. Because the entire thing I've been doing so far was just console applications. So I wanted to go into GUI, like, oh, this is the modern world stuff. And it was at that point I realized that maybe computer science is something that I can study.
And just to
And luckily
clarify,
for me,
what you mean by GUI is graphical user interface for people who don't know.
correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. And luckily for me, my university, Lautech, allows people to switch courses when you are still in 100 level. So when I go back to school, I started working on switching my course, and that's how I got into computer science.
Right, that's an interesting story, really.
Yep.
Because I even forget that you were in a Greek. You told me this before.
Yeah, I
Uh,
did.
I guess it's that building something that was useful kind of drew you to computer science. People can actually use.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
you mentioned something about Pascal. Credit to the university because when I eventually I studied mechanical engineering. When I took the Pascal course, I kind of enjoyed it as well. CSC 201, Introduction to Pascal.
Yeah.
Now, Pascal is not a very people don't use Pascal for programming these days, but it's a very good programming language to explain some fundamental computer programming concepts. And it was a really good course. I enjoyed it as well. Right. So I'm just moving on to the next question. So you've talked about how you got into Android, right? You're a computer science, right? And you had this other. Okay, wait. Before I move on to that, did you pick Agric initially as your core? Was that what you wanted to study initially?
Of course not. I wanted to be a medical doctor, but then I got a Greek. So I'm like, okay, I'll just go there, see what it is. So I told myself back then that if I can't get medicine and Agric is what I'm getting, then I'm going to be like the best Agric student there is
Yeah.
because my belief is if you are excellent at what you do, you are definitely going to be okay in the future. So I went into Agric with that mindset, and I think I did pretty well for myself because in my first year, I had a very, very high CGP. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm on the path to be one of the greatest agri students this university has seen.
Yeah. Yeah. So from medicine to Greek, then to computer science.
Correct.
Cool. Now, talk me through how did you when you talk about your career, right? How did you've learned some things about Android. How did you get your first taste of Android developing for Android? Because it's a bit different from Pascal, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it's totally different. The first issue I had back then is that my computer was not powerful enough. It was a very crappy computer, and Android Studio requires a system that is powerful. So yeah, that was the first issue I had. Everything was slow. So just imagine coming from so back then for Java, we just used to use NetBeans to write. Sometimes you use Notepad++ if you want to feel like a badass. So just imagine coming from Notepad++ that is basically a text editor, is very fast, to Android Studio that requires a bit of power. So yeah, the first issue I had was that it was very slow, but I really enjoyed learning Android because at the time I was using an Android phone. So getting to understand how the phone I use works was very, very interesting to me.
And what were the first if you could remember, what were your first project you built with Android on Android?
Yeah, I remember. So my sister is a fashion designer, and when I learned Android a bit, I promised that I was going to build an application that would help her keep track of her clients' measurements, and also like a simple I don't know how to call it. Like call it a Jira board where you have like to-dos in progress and done. So I built like the first version for her, the MVP. It was working. And so the more I learned stuff in Android, the more I improved the application. Like the first version I built was definitely crappy. And then when I learned about, oh, this is how you can structure your code. Oh, you should use a repository to handle this part. I'm like, okay, I'm going to refactor this code to do this. That's what I did. But unfortunately, I'm not sure I still have the code base with me right now because I would definitely love to go over it and see what I wrote back then.
Right. So you mentioned a couple of things. Number one is code structure. Number two is version control. And I assume that you were the only one working on this at the time.
Okay, that's correct.
Um, so let's talk about before I move on to the actual question I want to ask, let's talk about how did you get your first like employment as a your first job as an Android engineer? How much did you know? And yeah, if you
Okay, so still, I'll go back to my university days. I became the director of software for my department. That's one of like the posts we had. So the previous DOS was also an Android engineer. Lucky for me. When it was time for our IT at the fourth year, I reached out to him to say, "Hey, by the way, it's time for IT, and it would be nice if I just do it in a company because I had two options then. Is either I go for IT or I stay back in school to help people." Because we also had a company that we founded then to like train people, make some money. So I reached out to him and then he said, "Oh, there's this company that needs an Android engineer. I'll link you up with their was it CEO at the time?" And I'm like, "Okay, yeah, that's fine." So they reached out to me to say, "Hey, we heard you bid for Android. Here's this test. Can you just build like this sample application and stuff?" Oh, no. It wasn't even a sample application. We just talked verbally about some of their products, like the applications they use and all that. And when I got to Lagos, I went in, I took a look at the application. They had this idea they were trying to build at the time. So I helped them work on it. And yeah, that's how I got my first gig. So when my internship was done, they retained me. They asked if I could
well, hold
work
on,
while I
hold
was
on,
in
hold on,
school.
hold on. At this point, how much did you know about Android? We've talked about, doing a lot of trainings for people, training people and getting paid for it.
Yeah.
How much did you actually know about Android before, you they were because when you hire someone, you're kind of confident that this person can do the job, right? So how much did you know
Yeah.
at that point? And how did you demonstrate it to back then?
I would say I would say I knew like all the basic concepts around Android. I could build like a complete application. I could deploy it to the Play Store. So then what's now going to matter is the problem you are trying to solve, like what domain are you in? Because Android is broad, your products could be focusing on something like if you work at Snapchat, for instance, then you know that your product will focus on like graphics and camera and all of that. So yeah, it depends on your domain. So what I did was I knew the basics of Android generally, and the company I ended up working for, they deal with contactless payment, which is NFC. So what I had to do was just read up on NFC, like to see the APIs we have available on Android to help me to like to make me suitable for the job. But demonstrating my ability, I had a call with the CTO. Yeah, it was CTO at the time. I had a call with the CTO. We just conversed about like my background and all of that. So from the conversation, he could tell that I knew what I was doing. And like I said, they had an idea that they were trying to prototype. So he told me to like look into this. This is what we're trying to do. And yeah, I gave him feedback on it. So yeah, that's how I was able to know that okay, this person knows what he's doing.
Right. So at the time, were you did you have all these concepts like system design, architectures, and things like that? Were you pretty much you knew all of that at the time?
Yeah, I did because when I started out learning how to code, I was lucky enough to also like start looking into algorithms and start reading lots of articles on how to architect your code and all of that. I also have friends around me that did it, so that really helped. So from day one, I had always been particular about having a very good structure in your code because I believe if you start building your code on a structure that is not nice, at the end of the day, you need to rewrite everything. So I knew a bit about like the typical architecture that we use for Android. At that time, I think I started with MVC. I'm not entirely sure, but I know that shortly after we just moved to MVP. That's when MVP was like the host thing, and then I used MVP quite a lot before we moved on to MVVM and now MVI.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, so you got the job, right? What was your day to day like?
Yeah. Okay. The first time I went into to like the company, I was very nervous that day, like meeting everyone. There was one other Android engineer in the company because the company was just starting very small. Um, So what I was focused on was this new idea that they were trying to prototype. So I was basically working alone. I had the freedom like to be as creative as I wanted. And that's one thing that really helped me. They had this freedom, like just do your thing. At the end of the day, we are just particular about the results. We're not going to micromanage you. We're not going to tell you to do it this way or that way. Just give us a good result. So yeah, my day to day. Also the company was very flexible with time. The company is Touch and Pay Technologies, if anyone wants to look them up. So they were very
Yeah.
flexible with time. You could work whenever you wanted. So back then, I typically preferred working in the middle of the night, like from late nights to middle of the night. So during the day, I could just be chilling, watching YouTube or learning something new. Then once it's like 9 p.m., I can code till 2 a.m. or 3 a.m., depending on how the spirit leads.
Right. And your internship lasted for how long then?
6 months.
6 months. And after you got
Yeah.
like a retain offer. Say, join us.
Yeah. Yep.
But yeah, before we actually talk more about that, you know, um, I know you've personally explored other technologies, right? What made you stay with Android? There's web, there's cross-platform, and then there's native. What native Android? What made you stick with native Android development?
Number one is it's just Google and the community. Like the community of Android engineers is very, very is really great. So once you're part of that community, it's very hard for you to leave. From Android, I tried to do web. I really couldn't find that community. So I was learning like stuff from different areas and different pieces. And because Android was the first platform that I really went deep into, I just couldn't like fall in love with a different platform. I tried web. And then when Flutter came, I tried to build with Flutter as well for a while. Flutter was interesting. I tried native iOS too, but at the end of the day, Android is the one that I really, really enjoy because I love the platform itself. I love the community around it. And yeah, I think that's it really.
So when you talk about the community, what do you mean exactly?
Okay, community like for instance, if there's a new concept out in Android, like in recent times they introduced Compose. If you go online to look at the resources, like the official resource from Google themselves, they have enough for you to get up to speed with Compose and do amazing things with it. And Google has this thing that they do. Back then we had this IO app that they used to release because they do the IO event every year. So for every year there's an app, and that app is going to utilize some of the new features they're introducing to Android. So they're giving you a chance to see how you can take these apps from like just the tutorial screen and apply it to your application, like see it in a live environment and see how it works. So yeah, that's what I mean by the community. We have lots of people contributing to this and making everything cool.
And when we talk about Android, we have to remember it's open source, right? So there's a huge community on Android that you can't. There's someone willing to explain to you what particular thing does very well online. It's not like a niche thing where you will struggle to find information. And
Yeah,
now,
that's correct.
and you were pretty big. You climbed up the ladder within that developer community, right? At least
No,
on
I
campus.
wouldn't really say that.
Okay.
Oh, on campus, yeah, but in the Android world generally, I wouldn't really say that because I'm kind of like a low-key developer. I don't really go on
You're
like
being
my
humble
social
now,
media
aren't
like Twitter. No, I won't even really say humble, but I'm not the type to go on like my social media to like post about Android stuff every now and then, which is bad because I should be giving back to the community. My own way of giving back is like always mentoring new engineers that are coming into the Android space. I did it quite a lot in university. These days, I don't really have so much time on my hands to do it, but I still do it. I make sure that at every point in time, I have at least one mentee.
you? Right, right. And right now you're a senior developer at Yelp. And this came after, a long, you spent some time at Touch and Pay, right?
Yeah, I did. I spent 3 years at Touch and Pay.
And let's talk about Touch and Pay now. Now you're a full-time staff. You're part of the, shall I say, founding team. Is that correct?
No, it was founded already before I joined.
Okay. All right. But you were pretty early in the company.
Yeah, I was.
And what was it like? because what was it like? Let me put words in your mouth.
Yeah, I would say it's one of the best decisions I made in my life. Like being part of a startup that is still very early can really help the career of an engineer. At least it really helped me because that means that there are lots of things to be implemented that were resting solely on my shoulders. Like I had the freedom to introduce new architecture into the code base to say, okay, yeah, these are like the best practices we want to do moving on. I was also involved with recruiting new engineers to the team. So yeah, doing that really helped me like be a problem solver because as a startup, the resources are limited and we have lots of problems to solve. So you need to be able to solve problems and you need to solve it fast. So
Right.
that really helped me. Yeah. And what else? Yeah, like just the ability to be able to like solve problems really, really fast really helps me. And not having like something to reference or someone else to like fall back on to say, hey, I'm trying to solve this problem. Can you help me? I got used to being like the sole problem solver, at least for the Android application. I knew that if there's a problem with this application, nobody's going to solve it. I have to be the one to solve it. So that really helped me upskill in my problem solving.
Yeah, that sounds quite a lot, like a lot of responsibility. Um,
Yeah.
and it sounds like, back then there was a lot of learning you had to do. What was the structure you put in place to be able to keep, because the world of software engineering, correct me if I'm wrong, is like an ever expanding universe. There's always some, right now as you're sitting, somebody is publishing something out there that will be useful for you. And how did you keep in touch with all of these things going on? That you're able to say,
Yeah.
what,
So
for this particular problem, this is the best way to do it.
yeah, so that's one thing that I was even going to mention. When I was going to join Touch and Be for my internship, there was someone I look up to. His name is Abraham. He told me that when you get to this place, there's a lot to be done, but don't ever stop learning because you could get caught up in just trying to push this out, and in the process, you're not even going to update yourself to know what's going on. So I have one practice that I've always done since I became an Android engineer, and I still do it till now, which is my Sundays are always for learning something new in Android. So I subscribe to the Android Weekly newsletter. I can't remember when I subscribed, but I know that the newsletter comes in every Sunday, and that's why I still do it till now. So once it's Sunday, I'm waiting for the newsletter in the evening. Once it comes in, I go through like the articles in the newsletter just to see what's going on in the community. And also I follow lots of Android engineers on Twitter. So whenever they write an article, for instance,
Yeah.
they post it, I go through the articles. And when I was very early in my career, I used to follow or no, I still follow Moi, and that's Moi, Adeyemi and
Yeah.
Shegun Famisa.
She works
And
at
they
Twitter,
really
right?
did a lot.
And the
Oh
Android.
yes. Yeah, she also does Android. Shegun also does Android. So they really did a lot for the community back then because if you go to Shegun's timeline, I'm not sure about now, but back then, if you go to Shegun's timeline or Moin's timeline, they're always retweeting articles about Android. They're also writing articles about Android. So back then, when I wake up in the morning, I just go to their timeline to see like this new interesting thing that they posted about. Also on GitHub, I follow Android engineers. So when they start a new project, for instance, you see it on your timeline, I go to check that like, hey, if this project is interesting to Moi or interesting to Shegun, then maybe it's something worth checking out. So
Mm.
yeah, those are the things that really help me to learn stuff.
Yeah. And also you attend events, is that correct? Particularly the Google
Yep.
one. Yeah. I think
Yeah,
the
yeah,
first
I
the
do.
first time we met, even though we went to the same university, the first time we met was at an event in Lagos. A
Yeah,
developer.
that was GDG in 2016.
Yeah. And that was actually my first time in Android because I studied mechanical engineering. I was getting bored. Anyways, I was getting bored of mechanical engineering. So um right. So, every Sundays you do that. Is there any other thing you do?
Is it right now or when I was just like trying to ramp up
I
on
mean,
Android?
right, it could be right now, it could be now. Because now
Okay,
there's
yeah.
even a
So
rapid things going on right now. Yeah. Please go on.
yeah, so I think back then I actually used to learn more than I do right now. So besides learning Android, I was also solving problems on Akarang. I really loved
Right.
Akarang back then. So I solved problems on Akarang. I tried to read up on system design, even though I forget most of the concepts eventually because I don't use it. But I mean, it's good to just be aware of those things. I read up on system designs, And yeah, there were some programming books I used to read back then, like anything that has tech in it, then I'll just consume it. And that
Right.
also affected me in school because then my CGPA really dropped because I was focusing more on tech as opposed to school. But that's still for another day. Because I mean, if you ask any engineer that went like that studied computer science and they were very active in tech, at some point you get bored with school and you just focus more on your thing. So yeah.
Right. Right. So talk me through how you became a senior software engineer. There's a process, right? You come in, you know, I mean, you there's a lot of learning you did, but you come in on one end, now you're at this end where you pretty have you have an overview of what's going on. What's the difference for
Okay.
you being beginner and senior now?
I think the major difference is the expectation that people have from you. So when I joined Touch and Pay as an intern, they knew, oh, this person is junior, is still in the university. So that means if I made some mistakes, they could easily overlook it to say, oh, this person is just coming up. But I feel like right now I'm in a position where the kind of mistakes that I make are mistakes that other people are not going to catch. You know, like the obvious ones to say, oh, this is a rookie mistake. So yeah, the expectation is the difference for me. And also when you are starting out, I feel like you will not really be focused on a particular thing. You try to get as much knowledge as possible. Like for Android, it's really wide. You try to learn as much as possible. But when you get to like a more senior role, depending on what you have to do every day for work, you might need to focus on just one aspect of Android and be an expert at it. Because if this is what you do every day, then if anybody's bringing a problem, you should be able to solve their problem. You can't be clueless. You can't afford to be clueless.
Right. So, if you were starting your career again today, what would you do differently?
I've never really thought about this one. I'm not sure there's anything I would do differently. Maybe one thing I would do differently is go into Android earlier than I did because, like I said, I didn't plan to go into Android. But yeah, maybe that's anything I would change. Going into Android earlier than I did.
Hmm. Okay, fair enough. I mean, at the time when wow, 20 you started 2014. That's
Yeah.
early. Okay. And now new technologies are coming up every day, right? So like for example, Flutter and now, what do you I guess the question I'm trying to ask is what do you make of like the future of Android development?
Hmm. So yeah, the perfect feature everyone is dreaming of is where you can write like a piece of code on one platform and you can deploy it everywhere. I mean, we have those right now, but then they obviously come with trade-offs. Some might be like the trade-off might be in performance or maybe in the compilation time or whatever. So what I really the future of Android, I mean, Google was working on an operating system called Fuchsia at some point. So Fuchsia was meant to power everything, like power desktop, power Android, like even their smartwatches and all of that. So the future I see is like Google having this singular OS where you have just one programming language, you can deploy it everywhere without needing to, I don't know, learn some sort of new framework. Because even with these tools we have today that deploy everywhere, there are still some things you will need to learn. Like, okay, if once deployed to iOS, maybe this is like the sort of things that you need to do to eventually deploy or this. So the future I'm looking at is just one language. Like, since it's the same operating system, there's no need for you to learn a new framework to deploy to the smartwatch or to deploy to Android. It's going to be crazy, but it will be really, really exciting.
Right. I read that they discontinued the project, the Fuchsia project.
Yeah, I think so. It's been a while now, and there's no like news on it. So maybe, or maybe it's in the works. Lucky, I guess we'll find out in a couple of years.
Right. So, what advice do you have like for beginner Android developer willing to come into the Android development space, as a career? What first of all, how much do you need to learn? And yeah, and what do you need to learn?
So if you pick up a course on a site like Udacity, for instance, Google has an official course that introduces you to Android. So if you pick up those beginner courses, they will give you like an overview of everything you need to know, like to build basic Android applications. Then when you're done with those courses, that's when you go deeper into like the Android world to explore new things, to see what's new in Android world. So I would say if you want to come into Android, definitely check out one of like the official courses from Google. I'm pretty sure they have a guide somewhere to guide you through what you need to learn to become an Android engineer today. So yeah, go through that and try to follow Android engineers. Sorry.
Listen.
Follow as much Android engineers as you can
Mm.
as possible, especially on Twitter, because when folks write articles, they post it on their Twitter feed. Go there, read the article. If you have questions, leave a comment. The cool thing about Android is everyone is always willing to help you. So if you read an article and you don't really understand like some stuff in the article, feel free to go to the person's DM on Twitter if it's open, or just leave a comment on the article. They will definitely be able to like help you out. Yeah, those are my tips. Follow as much Android engineers as possible. Get yourself a structured course that will like teach you the basics, and yeah, just take it up from there.
And correct me if I'm wrong. Here's how I see what someone should do as an Android developer. Number one is learn Java or Kotlin. Number two is learn object-oriented programming.
Learn Kotlin. Don't learn Java. Learn
Kotlin,
Kotlin.
okay. Learn
But I mean, to be
Kotlin.
fair, there's a chance that you might work at a company where they have some legacy code written in Java. So yeah, learning Java is not a waste too.
Right. And then object-oriented programming. Then architecture, what's it? System design patterns. So
Yes.
and version control. Those are like my three recommendations. I don't know if you agree or you have any addition, or disagree.
Yeah, so things like version control and not just restricted to Android is like part of the tools you need to learn to be a software engineer in general. So yeah, and also learning like the design patterns, architectural patterns as well is going to help you become like a well-rounded software engineer. It doesn't necessarily need to be restricted to Android.
Right. So now talk me through how you got hired, your hiring journey at Yelp. You've been working at
Okay. Yeah, so while I was at Touch and Pay, I was at Touch and Pay for 3 years, like I said. And then I wanted to just see what was out there in the world because while I was at Touch and Pay, I didn't interview or anything. So yeah, I started checking on LinkedIn to like see job openings and just listen to what they had to offer. So when I came across Yelp, I sent him my application. I had a call with the recruiter. At
and
the point,
let's
I
be
wasn't even
clear, right? Let's
planning.
be clear, right? This is not your first international application, right? You kind of have an idea of what to expect. Is that correct?
Yeah, so Yelp was my second international application. I had one with a German company and we're just talking, and the person was like, "Oh, you have less than 5 years of experience, but we need someone that has more than five." So yeah, we are not going to move forward with your application. I'm like, you even need to know like my skill level before you judge me based on the years I have, because I could have 5 years in the game and not update myself, have this archaic legacy knowledge and all. But yeah, that's that. So that went out of the window. And then I spoke to Yelp and they wanted me to relocate to London. And at that point, I wasn't even planning to relocate to London. I wanted a remote job in Nigeria so I can ball now, collect pounds, change the naira and enjoy the good life. But yeah, the role required me to be in London. So
Right.
I I was like, okay, we'll just continue with the application. So I had my first interview, and to be honest, I didn't prepare for the interview at all. But because I was used to solving problems already, like I solve problems on Akarank.
When you
When
talk
I'm
about
bored, I go on
problems, I just need
Akarank.
to clarify. It's data structures and algorithms.
Yeah, that's correct.
Right.
So I've been doing those since I was in university, and whenever I get bored once in a while, I'll just go on Akarank, pick a question, try to tackle it.
It's
So
like your
when I had my first interview
antidepressant.
with them, I'm what?
It's like your cool off thing you use.
Yeah, because it's just like a fun thing I do. So when I had my first interview with Yelp, there was no need for me to even prepare. Like I felt like there was no need for me to prepare because, to be honest, I didn't think I was going to get the job. I wasn't planning to move to a new country and all of that. So I'm like, okay, you know what? We'll just do the first interview and see how it goes. So I had the first interview and they said I passed. I'm like, okay, I think this thing is becoming real. And then I was going to move to like the final stage, which would have system design and more like data structure and algorithms problems to solve. So it was at that point that I started grinding lead code. I'm like, okay, I think I need to like sharpen my skills a bit more because I passed this one without preparation, but maybe the next ones they are definitely going to be tougher. And also one thing about system design, at least for me, is that after reading it for a while, I forget most of the concepts. I know the underlying concept, but I mean, for an interview, you need to be very, very sharp with it. So I had to go back to system designs and like study it, grind lead code, and I took my final interviews, got an offer, and here I am.
Now you said you didn't want to move, but now you live in London. Do you miss it? Do you is it like you want to go back to I mean,
Nigeria. So the thing is, I've set up like a new life here, so I can't just pack up and go back to Nigeria or just move to a different country.
right.
Like moving countries right now is like is very, very tough.
Mm.
It is.
So is there a particular book you enjoy on system design? I mean, you've mentioned two sites for data structures and algorithms, leak code and hacker, but for system design, it's more about, is there a particular resource you?
Yeah, there's this book. I can't remember the exact title right now, but I think it's designing applications that scale or something. I can't really remember the name right now, but yeah, that book is really nice. I enjoyed it. But if you're preparing for an interview, for instance, there's this website where you can use to prepare for system design interviews. What's the title now? I don't know. There's also one like my second choice is Mosh. The name of the person doing it is Mosh. But then there's a first one, Algo Expert. Yeah, that's the name. They have a system design portion on that website too that you can use. It's very good. I've used it.
So, we are about rounding up, but my time here is, I would just need to come back just to finish this off, if you don't mind.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, no other.
Let's start from there and see how it goes. Right. So welcome to the second part of this video. And quick fun, not so fun fact. Uh I lost the recording of the second part, so we're recording it. So we're talking about your recruitment journey, right?
Yeah.
Please just talk us through, what was it like recruiting for Yelp? Yeah.
Okay, so after I applied to Yelp, I
Yeah.
got my first call from the recruiter, which is just to get to know me, like where are
Mhm.
you from and all that. And that's when I found out that I needed to relocate to London. And like I said, I didn't really plan to like move to a different country at that point in my life. But I'm like, okay, yeah, it's fine. We'll just go through the interview. But
Mm.
because then I had my eyes on a different company actually. I was thinking I was going to be a part of them instead. So I didn't really take like the Yelp interview seriously at first. So when I had my first problem solving interview, I didn't prepare or anything, like maybe Jack, let's code overnight or whatever. I didn't do anything. But because I used to solve problems regularly, it wasn't a big deal to me. So I just went to the interview. The interview went well. I passed and they said, okay, you're going to the next stage. And
And
that's
when we
where
talk
I
about
knew that,
solving problems, you're talking about data structures and algorithms, right?
yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's when I got an email that okay, we're moving to the final stage, and it consists of multiple interviews, problem
Mm.
solving, system design, and we also have some behavioral questions for you. So that's where I started preparing, jacking lead code properly.
Right. And you've been doing lead code for a while now. At this point, you've been doing it for several, you've had a lot of experience with solving
Oh
this
yeah,
type of.
yeah, because way back in uni, like I started doing accounting since I was in uni. I also used to participate in Google's coding competition. What I am Ash Code, is
Hash
that's
code. Yeah.
title? Yeah, Ash
Yeah.
Code. I used to participate in Ash Code. You also used to participate in Ash Code, so yeah, you should know. Yeah,
Yes.
so problem solving for me as like I've been doing it for a long time.
Yeah.
So
Um, right. So they said, what other company was this second company you were talking about? Were they also in London,
yeah, this same company was in Germany.
Germany?
Yeah.
And you didn't what happened with them? Before we talk
Yeah,
about why you
so
decided to accept Yelp.
yeah, okay. So the company was one I mentioned that they wanted someone with 5 years of experience,
Right.
and yeah, that was the deal breaker
If
for
and
them.
without considering like your what you had to offer, they just said they wanted 5 years of experience.
Yeah, I mean, because yeah, so they were looking for someone that was very senior. I know for you to even pass like the first stages of like your interview, the first thing the HR and co will look at is like the years of experience you have and all of that. So yeah. Wait,
Um,
oh, Shane will cause that part. My babe they show for background that time.
oh, really? I didn't
Yeah.
see.
Yes. So we can just take that
Yeah,
part
yeah, we can
again.
take that out. Sure.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Yeah, the interview.
so
Yeah, let's continue.
so you got the job, right? And
Yeah.
what made you take it? We Yelp now.
Okay, so first of all, I was looking for a bigger challenge at the time. Like out so the apps I was building as Touch and Pay were used by thousands of people. And I'm like, okay, what does it feel like to build an app that is used by millions of people? Like what new things do you need to learn for you to make this app scale properly and all that? So I was very curious. I wanted to learn. And also Touch and Pay was like my first job straight out of university. And it was a startup, team was small. I wanted to know what it's like to work in an environment where you have lots of engineers and lots of moving parts. So that was like the first part for me. Like, okay, yeah, this is a place where I feel like I'm going to get to the next level in my career. And the second thing was the offer. The offer was very good. So
Hmm.
yeah, that's why I took it.
And you told me in the previous interview, in the one we lost, that
Yeah.
you checked in with some people to say if this offer was good enough, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I did because one mistake that most people fall into is that when you get an offer like that in pounds or dollars, you just immediately convert it to naira and you're like, oh my God, this is a lot of money and this offer is good. But no, you have to consider the cost of living where you are going to. Luckily for me, I had friends in London. So I just called them up to say, hey, I have this offer. Do you think it's a good offer? And they were like, oh yeah, this is pretty good for London. And I also I did a calculation of um what it will cost me to pay rent every month, transportation, feeding based on how they live, because we live like some sort of similar lifestyle. So I'm like, okay, how much you spend a month on accommodation, feeding, transport, and their taxes. So we did all the calculation. I'm like, okay, I'll be left with this amount every month. And it was pretty good for me. And also when I got the offer for Yelp, I was given two choices, which is move to London or move to Hamburg in Germany. So I also called up my friend in Germany to say, hey, if you got this offer, would you take it? And he was like, yeah, this is a very good offer. I'm definitely going to take it. So we also did the calculation, like cost of living in Germany, accommodation, and all of that. And I was like, okay, yeah, this is a good offer. So I took it. But I chose London over Germany because I have family in London and I have lots of friends in London compared to Hamburg, where I know just like, I don't know, 3, 4 people.
Right, right. Now you, initially, there was some hesitancy towards moving, right? But the
Yeah,
Yelp was like, you have to actually be in London for this role.
yeah. Yeah, because at the time, I preferred like my preference then was a job where I'll be like doing it remotely. So then I can get the dollars converted to naira and live
And live
like the chief of one place like that. But yeah, for Yelp, the role required me to be in London.
yeah.
The work is remote, but like they require you to be in the city just in case you need to come into the office or there's something. And also they ship equipment to you. So trying to ship that inter-country is going to be a bit messed up with customs and all of that. So yeah, it's just easier if you're in the country, and that's why I had to move to London.
Oh, right. The ship, that's really cool. They have like a budget for you to have a home office and all of that.
Oh yeah, there's that. So you get a monitor, you get obviously your MacBook, and you also get other accessories. So they give you the freedom to choose whatever you need: webcams, mouse, keyboards, trackpads, whatever you need, even headphones.
Cool. I know you're into headphones, so I'm curious what you chose.
Yeah, so I used to be into headphones, but now I just go with AirPods because it's very easy to carry around. And also, I have like my ear is always a bit much. So if I use headphones, it leaves a line in my ear, it kind of divides it and it's always awkward. So the options are is either I have an headphone, but I go around with a comb to always comb my hair back, or I just go with the AirPods. So yeah, AirPods, obviously.
Right. So you got the offer, you moved to London. Do you sometimes wish, maybe I wish, because it's cold, it's it's cold, it's I mean sometimes it's so cold. Yeah, it's cold. Do you sometimes wish maybe I was in Lagos?
Yes, like especially during winter, I always wish I was in Lagos. And
Mm,
that's why last year I took the whole December off and I was just in Lagos because that's when winter was starting over here. So I was in Lagos, I was going to the beach because
mm.
I'm like, only God knows when I'll be able to go to the beach if I go back to London. So yeah, when it's cold, I always wish I'm in Lagos or I'm living somewhere else like Dubai, for instance.
And the food as well. So
Yeah, so for food, I really don't miss Nigerian food much because there are lots of African stores in London. London is basically like Lagos. So all I eat is like Nigerian food in my house. Then when I go out, sometimes I go to African restaurants to eat, but most times I try to explore food from other countries as well, just to see what's out there, just to explore. Yeah, sometimes you get good food and you're like, oh, this is really nice, I'll have it again. And sometimes you're like, God forbid, I'm never eating this piece of crap again in my life.
um so uh, that's quite a journey from beginner to senior role with Yelp. And I asked about, what's the most difficult thing you have to deal with on your job?
I guess it's just bugs. So we have different type of bugs here. There are the obvious ones that you can easily reproduce, and there are
Mm.
some that you need to contact God before you can even reproduce it. And the problem is, if you can't reproduce a problem, then there's no way you can effectively solve it because at that point you're only just guessing what the problem could be. And
Mm.
while it could work for this particular use case, the underlying problem could still be there. But the
Mm.
moment you can reproduce something and you fully understand why it's happening, that's when you can fix it. So I guess the major problem I face at work is bugs that are very hard to reproduce.
Mm. Bugs are very hard to reproduce. And in what in when you encounter such scenario, what do you do? How do you go about it?
So you just have to try lots of scenarios to
Mm.
try to figure out why this is happening. You go through the logs, you try to understand like the different stages that the application went through before it landed there. And luckily for me at Yelp, our logging is top notch. So there are lots of information there for you to find out. But because the bug is not straightforward, you need to go through different channels just for you to fully understand that okay, this is what happened.
Right. And you don't have to say, but do you guys maybe like use Firebase, Crashlytics, or is it custom solution?
It's not a custom solution, but I really don't know if I should mention
Okay,
part
it's
of
all
the
right.
tools
It's
we
all right.
use.
It's all right.
Yeah.
It's all right. Um, so someone wants to start out as an Android developer. What
Yeah.
path do you think would you recommend they take?
So I'm pretty sure Google has a course on Udacity that you can take. They will definitely take you through all the basics of Android, like the important things you need to know. And then when you're done with that, I would say follow as much Android engineers as possible, especially on Twitter, because when these folks write articles, they tend to post it so you can always go through it, learn something new. Back
Mm,
when I was learning, there were lots of articles I read that didn't really make sense to me then because I had no use case for it. But
mm,
just knowing that something like this exists
mm,
is enough for you so that when you eventually need to do it, then you're like, oh, okay, I think I've read about this particular tool that exists. Let me see if it fits my use case. So if you don't know it exists in the first place, you won't even know where to look when you have a problem. You probably need to reach out to like someone else to like explain your problem to them. So I think that's what really helped me. I read lots of articles. They didn't really make sense to me at the time, but I was aware that okay, there's this thing called memory leaks, and there's this tool that can help you catch memory leak. So that when I eventually encounter it, I know okay, I've seen this before. I will now need to go back to read about it, understand it properly this time, and apply it to solve my problem. So yeah, follow Android engineers, read lots of articles. It doesn't really matter even if it doesn't make sense to you. One day when you need it, you will know that okay, yeah, I've seen something like this. Now let me go back and study it properly.
right. And it does sound like there's a lot of learnings to do as an Android developer. It's an ever evolving process.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that applies to software engineering field generally. Things are always changing. If you're working on something that is not changing, maybe you're doing the wrong thing. I don't know. I mean, there's some systems that don't need to change. That's fine, but it's very rare for you to work like your entire work is based on something that never changes and there's nothing new for you to learn. Because even when you have a system that never changes, there are still lots of things in that system that you might not understand yet. Like you could just encounter a bug that requires you to go into the details of how something was implemented. You are learning something new already. So yeah, for software engineering, you always have to learn.
And you know, for this kind of ever expanding field of knowledge, uh how do you present yourself to potential employers to say, you look, someone can know it all, but how do you present yourself in an interview, for example?
So if you're in an interview, there's no need to present yourself anymore because they're the ones asking you the questions. You just need to respond. So I guess before you get to the interview stage, what they must have looked at is like your experience, your resume. If you have a portfolio, good. If you have open source project that they can look at, it's very nice. So back when I used to recruit for Touch and Pay, the number one thing I used to look out for when candidates apply is like the open source projects that they link because I can get a whole lot of information from there. The moment I see you have an open source project, I first of all leave your resume to even read all the I'm a passionate, hardworking, fast-paced environment. I first leave all those on the side. I go straight to your GitHub. I clone your repository. I look at what you've done to be able to gauge the level you are. So from the way someone writes code, you can easily guess where they are in their career at the moment. Then you can go back to the resume to look at the stories that are there and decide if you want to grant them an interview or not.
Right. So you mentioned two things which I think are crucial in an interview. Number one is either you have like an open source project, you're contributing to an open source project, or you have a demo project yourself.
Yes, so contributing is not like a necessity, but at least have a demo project that they can look at.
Yeah, and something that's relevant, not just hello world,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, definitely. Because if I'm checking out your GitHub and the only thing there is hello world, the first impression I'm getting is this person is just starting out. Except the project is from like 3 years or 4 years ago, then I'm like, okay, they must have learned. But if I'm seeing a project from 2023 and the only thing there is hello world or like a calculator and the code is very basic, I'm like, okay, this person is just starting out. If it's an internship role, fine. But if you need a senior role, then you would want to look at other candidates.
And getting a job goes beyond just actually getting the job, right? Because in my experience, and correct me if I'm wrong, sometimes they prefer a bad hire. People don't, companies would rather not hire than hire a bad hire, if that makes sense. Is that correct?
I really don't know. I don't have a company of my own, but if I did have a company, yes, I'll better not hire than hire someone that is bad.
Then how do you stand out as not a bad hire? Because it just goes beyond writing code, right? Your personality also.
Oh yeah. So there are lots of things that go into like securing a job, how you interact with your colleagues, how you accept feedback and all of that can really determine how the company is going to go. Because just imagine a scenario where the tech lead cannot correct someone that is on their team. It's going to be problematic if the tech lead is afraid to correct you because then if you're doing something wrong, they're just going to keep quiet and they'll watch you keep doing something wrong. And sometimes this can lead to like productivity issues in the company. If both of us are not on good terms and I feel like I can't work with you, if you're supposed to work on a project, I would rather want to do it alone, which will take a longer time than reach out to you for help to do it for me because we're not on good terms. So yeah, there are lots of things that companies look out for, your personality, your communication skills, and all of that. And those are the kind of things that they try to gauge when they are doing these behavioral interviews.
Cool. And when doing these behavioral interviews, you do recommend answering the questions in a STAR approach.
Yes.
And if for those who don't know, can you just explain that real quick?
Oh yeah, so the STAR format of answering questions is so STAR stands for situation, task, action, and the result. So if they are asking you to describe something, give them the situation you were in, give them the task you were supposed to perform, the action you took, and the result it led to.
Okay, cool. And we're running out of time now. It's really unfortunate that we lost that bit of the interview because we
Yeah,
talked about a lot of things.
yeah.
But is there a question you wish I should have asked you in this interview that I haven't asked yet?
I guess the question would be, do I regret packing up my life in one country and moving into a new country that I've never been in before? And my answer would be no, because I think naturally I'm not someone that is very adventurous. So the thought at the time was stressing me out. But when I actually did it, I'm like, oh yeah, this is really cool. So
Mm,
I don't have any regrets. And I
mm,
guess it also helped that I had friends and family in the new country that I was moving to. So settling in was very, very easy. Like when I was trying to get an apartment while I
mm.
was still in Nigeria,
Right.
I needed pounds to be able to pay for it. Like, and the only thing I had was my Naira debit card. I didn't have dollar account or anything. But because I had friends here, I was able to say, hey, just let me pay for this. When I get there and I set up my account and all, I'll just give it back to you. So yeah, having someone in the country I moved to really made everything very smooth for me, and I have zero regrets.
Right. And did you have, how did you, okay, you said you have family here, right? So there wasn't any adjustment for you?
Um, Adjustment, yeah, the only adjustment is I started cooking my own meals because when
Right.
I was in Nigeria, so I have family here, but I didn't stay with family from like the first day. I got my own place. So back when I was in Nigeria, I used to buy food like 3 times or 4 times daily. I used to buy food every single day. When I moved to London, that was not like very, very easy. And again, it's very, very expensive to like be buying food every day here in London. You just wreck. So the first thing I needed to do was like start cooking my own meals. And I discovered that I actually enjoy cooking because the kind of person I am is I love learning new things. So I started learning how
Anything
to cook
that
some.
takes you away from that, it's a problem for you. Is that correct?
Yes, yes. So I started learning new stuff like how to cook, like cook this meal, cook this meal. Sometimes they'll be sweet, sometimes they won't be sweet. I'm like, okay, we move. So yeah, that was like the adjustment I needed to make.
What's the right now? What's the favorite thing about living in London for you?
I think it's the freedom I have to do whatever I want to do whenever I want to do it,
Mm.
and nobody saying anything about it. So like I could go out at 3 a.m., come back at 5 a.m. I'm not scared of like police stopping me to harass me or extort me and all that. And again, people here tend to mind their business. So right now my hair is colored, but I'm wearing a cap so you can't see it. If I
Mhm.
was in Nigeria, I'm very sure some people will call me like, why did you color your hair? I just know that you started looking like a bad boy. But I mean, over here, nobody gives a damn. Even if your hair is pink, is red, or whatever, if you like pierce your eyeballs, nobody gives a damn about you. You just live your life how you want to live it. So yeah, I guess that freedom to express myself is what I really love about moving to London.
Right, right. And also the nightlife, right?
Yeah, the nightlife. I really, really love the nightlife.
So, how do you unwind? Because software engineering is can take a toll on you. Does it?
Yeah. So I already mentioned part of it, which is the nightlife. I really enjoy clubbing.
Mhm.
I'm also a gamer, so I play games. I enjoy playing FIFA. I play Call of Duty. I play Need for Speed. And yeah, I go out a lot with my friends to like see new places, try out new restaurants. Sometimes my friends organize like house parties. I go there to have fun or like a birthday party. You'll find me there.
And um, you know, you don't if you don't mind sharing your maybe your PlayStation or how to
Oh
do.
yeah, I game on a PlayStation, so my PCN is Funsho Fab.
Yeah. All right. Before we go, what's your favorite movie or movies? If you may.
My favorite movie is Think Like a Man 2. I
Part
really
two.
love that movie. Yeah, the part two. The part two is way more interesting than the first one. So that's my favorite. And if we're talking about series,
Yeah.
it's definitely Vampire Diaries
Mm,
and the originals. So the originals is a spin-off of Vampire Diaries.
right.
I watched this way back in 2011 or so. I followed it for a while till it ended. I really, really love that series.
Cool. Funsho Fab, senior engineer at Yelp. Thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Cheers, bro.
All right, bye.